Good evening to our viewers on our second episode today. I'm delighted to welcome Vittal Acharya. Mr. Vittal Acharya is based out of Bombay presently, and he's a HR leader with well over 2 decades of experience in HR. He describes himself as a keen student of people management and people process practices, and his special interest is in application. I guess that's like a custom fit for our video series, right? We'd love to see how to apply HR and concepts of HR. Thank you very much, Vittal, for being with us today. Vittal's worked with HCL Technologies, GE, General Electric, and presently with Sterlite Power. He would be sharing with us his experiences over specific instances when he's helped work at different levels in the organization, at strategic HR levels, at team effectiveness levels, at performance, individual performance levels, and so on, as also some examples around international implications of team effectiveness. Having said that, welcome, a very, very warm welcome to Gear Up, the Gear Up channel on YouTube. Vittal, hope you're safe and everything's fine with you.
Thank you, Sidhu. Glad to be here and welcome to the viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So Vittal, where would you like to start? Would you like to give us a context and then start on an example, let's say something on strategic HRM boundaries?
Sure. Yeah. I think what I will do, I'll just take a step back on what do we do in a function like human resources, and I think one of the, of course, there are in an organization you'll find various functions contributing in their own ways. So you have a finance function which looks at the financial measures of the organization, how each activity of the business translates into a financial metric, they track it, and so on and so forth. Likewise, a marketing sales, they look at customer behavior as one lens. You have operations folks who look at key operational measures as it relates to value creating activities. Likewise, HR as a function also looks at few key elements, and some of their data points may not be as quote unquote objective as it's called, but it also has a very important bearing on the fortunes of the organization. So from that, one of the metaphors that works well for people in the human resources function is the metaphor of a doctor, where the key skill of a doctor is diagnosis. And typically in people situations, diagnosis relative to solution to that problem statement is the crux. Once you're able to diagnose that there is this problem of this kind, this is the situation, the solution is relatively simpler, unlike problem statements in other fields like engineering and so on. So hence diagnosis becomes key, and when you look at diagnosis, you could look at diagnosing things at an individual level, where you're looking at problems from the worldview point of view of an individual concern. Or you can look at this problem statement from a group level, where an individual is part of a group and a group or a team. Or you can even abstract it further and look at a larger group or a larger division. And finally, you can look at it at an organization level. And sometimes in the context of an industry, you can even look at that as a problem from an industrial level, and so on and so forth. So the more richer is your diagnosis, better is the clarity on what one should do becomes. And many times the path ahead is relatively less important than being able to know what is it that we are dealing with. And sometimes you might end up taking very different paths, but with a very good understanding of why you took each of those paths. So that's where I would start from. And is there a specific question in mind? I'll pause here for a moment.
Thanks, Vittal. I think a wonderful a metaphor of being a doctor. So the diagnosis and then, probably a sharp segmentation, which allows us to solution for, outcomes that are needed, could be business outcomes and so on. And extending that very, line, Has there been a situation when there's been a business imperative, a business change, a large scale implication, could be as large as a global change, or it could be at an organization level as well, where there's been a strategic ask from HR, and what was the situation? If you could tell us more, I'm sure that would be great learning for all of us.
So as I said, I think we are in the business of solving problems, and many times we use our own functional lens, functional expertise to solve problems. And most of these problems are more business specific. So everything derives from the way business interfaces or interacts with its environment, the kind of strategies it pursues in the fulfillment of its services to its customers, and so on and so forth. One of the situations that I went through in one of my roles is an organization which was mostly manufacturing product centered in a market which was saturated. Also, the products were more commoditized, lower margins. They wanted to get into more higher margin, higher value services offerings to their customers, which meant that they not only manufactured their product, but more importantly, crafted a solution, built a solution to a customer, and then got paid for whatever solution that they delivered. So this organization that I was part of was looking to transition into a more services-led offering from a product-led offering, which meant a lot of fundamental changes in the way they did things. One, no longer it was relationship-based selling. Now selling became more consultative, and hence from a very shorter sales cycle, it became a much longer sales cycle. So that was one key fundamental change. Second was, earlier it was more pricing-led offerings. So typically you would win an order if you are L1 or the lowest price. Now it became more solution-led. How closer was your solution to the needs of the customer, and hence you could demand a price basis the appropriateness of the solution to the customer. And so the application engineering, the solution application became the crux of selling. Third, of course, as I said, it was shorter cycle to a longer cycle. And importantly, the entire operation, once you won an order, fulfilling the order moved from a fairly simple set of problem statements to execute once you win an order to a more complex operation, because it was no longer enough to have won an order, but to fulfill that order enabled a lot of integrating things that one needed to do. You just not just had to manufacture your own products, but you needed to integrate various other solutions which were needed. So it became more of a systems integration rather than just a simple manufacture and then installation. So entire thing became more complex. Now, to enable this transition, there were a lot of problem statements or a lot of things that we needed to build, and many of them parallelly and possibly at a very short time. So some of the problems that I worked on were looking at what were the capabilities that were needed, what were the new capabilities that were needed from the older context, which meant capabilities in the way we sold, to how we sold, to some of those skills like doing planning and analysis, which were very new, which were not there in the past, to also look at the way some of the processes reinforced the new way of working. Processes right from the way you would size a market, to way you set a goal, to way you measure what would success mean in achievement of those goals, but completely different from the older mindset, older context. And finally, as you are integrating these new capabilities into the organization, how do you take existing people along? The people that get impacted in the, they feel that they don't have the right skills. So what will happen to them? That there'll be a lot of anxiety. Second is the newness of the processes. Change managing these processes becomes very key. So these were the areas where I played an important role, and also was key part of the entire strategy of going from product-led to a services-led organization.
Thank you, Vittal. I'll probably give you a breather by summarizing what you just said. because it's been very nice of you to actually tell us the entire analysis and then the implementation. So you really started off talking about the shift, saying it was more value for the company of moving from product led to becoming solutions led, and hence it's called a services company. And hence, because it is a solution creation, it's really becoming a consulting kind of effort there. And this also meant taking people along, right? So how does HR play a role there, integrating solutions and so on? I'm sure many of our users, our viewers, sorry, are quite also interested in saying, hey, how did you, I mean, what did you actually do, right? It's fine telling, guys need to learn consulting skills, or guys need to learn how to plan. How did you actually do this? What did you do?
I think many things many things which go about once you have the business strategy, the approach towards that strategy. The next is the entire org structure, the organization, the way you would structure your organization to help translate those strategy into executable actions. So you look at the entire organization structure, which means looking at key roles or different roles, some of them existing roles, changing of those existing roles to some of the new roles that get added. And third is filling the gaps. One, from the skill point of view. Second is capability point of view. And the final thing is, how do you make this entire thing work through a set of systems, processes, policies, policies ranging from how you manage performance to how you manage rewards, to what are those guiding principles, and so on and so forth. And finally, an element which very important but very difficult to nail is the software aspect of how all of them fit together.
Yeah.
And what are those telltale signs, both leading and lag indicators of whether is the revised organization on the right track, the effectiveness of the new organization in its journey. So the role of me in an HR function transcended all these aspects, right from the organization structure to filling or full placement, as well as staffing of key roles, to looking at those set of policies, systems, and processes which help the functioning of the new org, to looking at the shift in the culture which helps the entire organization in its journey. So right from specific actions to more broader set of areas which covering a lot of actions. Helping this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think really you covered a caselet on strategic HRM there by talking about right from shared values to staff and structure to systems, processes, style or culture, and so on. Wonderful. We'll probably definitely want to have you back on the culture piece one of these days on GearUp channel to understand, hey, how have you built cultures and so on. As of now, we'll not get into operationalization of that. Would you want to share a few quick learnings from that particular incident, and then move on to probably the next learning or specific event that you have in mind?
Yeah. And I think one of the important learnings that I have is that for any change to happen, no matter how good your solution is in terms of the right organization, right structure, right policies, if this change is not managed well, I think things fail. So much so that in one of the organizations I work, there used to be a unwritten rule, or rather actually both written and unwritten rule, so well internalized that 90% of all interventions failed because of the acceptance to that change. So we would spend a lot of time in change managing any transition, which means that you co-opt a lot of stakeholders in a very structured way in this journey of change. That's one key learning. And I think this, I would say, is one of the key learnings. And second, I think is there are lots that is there from the body of knowledge that, say, HR as a function borrows from the field of sociology to economics to political science to various other disciplines, from where you can borrow appropriate methods, frameworks, know-how to be able to help with your in your journey, and including fields like the labor, the economic environment, and so on and so forth of a particular country can help in this. So I think those have been some of my learnings in this exercise.
Wow, very powerful learnings there. Thank you for sharing that with our viewers. Would you like to probably touch upon the second event that you wanted to share with all of us for our learning?
Okay, so I think I'll take an example of, so as I said in the short while back, that there are many things that you can borrow from your core discipline. And there are some of those very simple tools, simple theories, which can be very powerfully applied in your work context. And one example that I can think of is how do you transition? How does a leader transition in a role, in a new role, right? And you will find that most of the organization, the effectiveness of an organization is dependent predominantly not just on the people, but also on the first level leaders that each organizations have. So in a couple of organizations that I worked, we had a practice called new leader assimilation, and the entire new leader assimilation process hinged upon a construct by Harry Ingram and Jonathan Luft called the Johari window, where the leader and the team go through a 3/4 of a day exercise where the leader gets a fairly anonymous feedback on aspects which are functional and dysfunctional. And these feedback is reflected back to the leader, and the leader then collectively looks at making changes to his or her operating style. And this entire process is done in a very non-judgmental, non-evaluative way for it to be psychologically easy for both the leader as well as the team. And a large part of the leadership transitions in their new roles as managers of teams or new programs is smoothened by this entire use of this simple principle of giving and sharing feedback related to effectiveness in their role. So this is one example that I can think of. Another example that I can think of is when a team gets into new territories, new areas. And in this example, it's a new country that we were going into. And over a period of 6 months, we had built a local team, which worked in close coordination with a team from this country, India. And this team was working closely on a few of the major bits that were coming up in that country. So we had, at one point in time, a fairly large team of approximately 50 members from both the new country as well as India, which were working on bidding for the product projects that we were bidding for. And one of the among the various things that we did in terms of putting a structure, putting SOP, acquiring few skills required to be able to do some of the bidding related activities in that new country. We also felt that there was a need to enhance the effectiveness of this cross-cultural, cross-country team. And we borrowed so to make this more meaningful, we borrowed from the work of Hofstede. We connected with an agency which was an expert in this field. So over a period of about a month, we conducted a few workshops for reflection as well as action planning using the Hofstede's model of cross-culture framework. And over a period of about a year, I think this team, over a period of 18 months, they participated in 3 auctions and won close to about 60% of all the projects that they bid for. Now, of course, winning the bid was not the most important thing, but I think the way this team worked together was, I think, made much more powerful by focusing also on the softer aspect of their teams working. One of the takeaways from use of a structured intervention like Hofstede method was for them to understand the styles of how an Indian approaches things to how a person from that country, native of that country, approaches things. And one example was one of the dimensions in Hofstede's model is uncertainty avoidance. How do people of a particular culture respond to situations of gray. And typically in that framework, Indians are relatively low on uncertainty avoidance. That means they are more tolerant to ambiguity. Whereas in the country that this team was working with, there they had a relatively lower tolerance for ambiguity. That means they needed more clarity. And hence the entire orientation of this team changed in terms of how they would approach, how in normal circumstance they take things for granted. They would not take things for granted in working in that situation. There was another facet which was around how they balance work and play. And Indians typically are more hard on themselves in terms of work, whereas in the new country there was a very even balance, and which resulted in some very simple but very powerful norms like no work after certain hours, no meetings after certain hours, despite they're working, in some cases, different time zones, no working on certain days, especially holidays and so on and so forth. So, which was quite contrary to their own natural style in their home country. So things like this resulted in some very simple but very meaningful changes in the working styles of members in both the countries.
Wonderful. Thank you for both those examples, Vital. I think as I kind of take a bird's eye view, or let's say even a higher eagle's eye view, right, over all the examples that you've given, there is an underlying theme of acceptance. It could be acceptance of newer ways of working when the business itself changes, acceptance of the leader, getting the leader a bit of acceptance, or in this case, accepting each other's differences in terms of working style and so on. And really it seems to be pointing towards influencing, right? And influence is pretty much what leadership is about. And hence, your role in actually facilitating large groups, helping people become more successful, helping leadership really blossom there. I think wonderful examples. Would there be any example you have in mind for some time when, let's say, there has been an industry shift, when there has been some temporal impacts over a longer period in time?
Sure. No, I think I can reflect on a few experiences where I've been part of the consequence of that episode or event.
Mm-hmm.
And at that stage, of course, we were more into solving. We couldn't have done anything to unravel what had happened. And this is from 2007, 2008. We were faced with a situation where we had about four or five new products that were getting introduced at the same time, aircraft engines. And typically, products of this kind have a very long cycle, almost 30-35 years. Just to put things in perspective, a typical an automobile would have a 3 to 5 year product cycle, and a railway locomotive would have almost a 20-25 year life cycle. An aircraft engine would have approximately 30-35 year life cycle. So most of the products which were designed in the early 80s were coming up, were getting reintroduced. So this was a situation that we were faced with. And interestingly, which meant that, of course, we needed more people, more smaller teams, and so on and so forth to work on these new product lines that were coming up. But we were also faced with a very peculiar situation. The situation was that we had a workforce which was relatively weeble in distribution, bimodal in distribution. That is, we had a large set of people who were on the verge of retirement, almost about 30 to 40% people. And on the other hand, we had a large set of people who were early, less than 10 years in their roles, especially in the engineering function. And there were very few in between these two, large and the and then upon reflection, it dawned on the entire organization that this event situation that we were faced with in late 2008-9 was a result of some actions that we took in the early 90s. Early 90s was a phase when there was an oil shock and the entire aviation sector went through a recessionary phase, which meant that many organizations in this sector had closed down, or rather not done enough of hirings at the entry level and so on and so forth. and the entire impact of that lack of action over 4-5 years was felt during this phase. And of course, it was also an interesting phase because we started to work on newer set of problems. The problems were, okay, how do you shorten the cycle of a person becoming more and more expert? Earlier, if it would take about 5 to 7 years to become an expert in a specific discipline, how do you shorten that cycle? We also were working on programs, of course, with partnership with some leading research university on how do you transfer knowledge between one generation to another. So what are certain set of processes or practices which can help transfer of knowledge and so on and so forth. So this situation that we faced with was something which was based on an action or a set of series of actions way back, and likewise, I think this also points to an insight that, okay, whatever actions we take today based on the situations that we're facing here and now can turn out very, very differently 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And as always, we are very wise with hindsight. But many times you're taking a decision for things which you don't know how it will unfold, sometimes even a year down the line. So being aware of those set of implications of whatever you do, though there are no right or wrong decisions that you can take, but there are definitely approaches to taking these decisions which can make it much more richer and meaningful as you go about dealing with these problems. So that has been another facet of my learning in my journey so far.
Thank you so much. Vital, while you were sharing this particular example of building experts rapidly, if I may call it, there was a mention you made of certain processes that could help these. Are these shareable? Because I'm sure our viewers would love to know a little more about.
Yeah. So in a way, yes, they can be shared. So for instance, what happens is many of these the aspects which help in shorter cycles of learning is the availability of best practices, the design practices, best practices, the various systems, and with greater digitization and collaboration tools, it becomes that much more easier. Another thing that helped us around that time was how did we enhance the entire learning infrastructure. We had an infrastructure which would train about 20 to 25 early graduate engineers in different programs. We expanded that scope to almost 300 people in India. So, which meant that we invested in few labs, we invested in few teaching infrastructure. We also created a dedicated program team to help transition a lot of people into these design practices and disciplines. We also borrowed a lot of experts from adjacent areas. For instance, rather than having only from aerospace, from campuses, we also looked at automobile as a sector, and then looked for specific lesson plans or learning plans which could get them up to speed in the required disciplines here. So those were some of those practices that we focused on.
Thank you so much.
Also, we also experimented with some of the roles. We also experimented with taking bets on people in some of those roles, which would otherwise have taken much longer in the previous context.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vital. I know you're a very big proponent of HR capability and building capability, business partnering capability among your own team members. Would you like to share something around that, and then we'll conclude this interaction?
Yeah, as I think, yeah, sure. I think, and just to build on my first thought on using diagnosis or doctor as a metaphor, and I think just building on it, if you look at HR as a function, like as an organizational doctor, one of the key the key things which helps a doctor is to continuously look for more and more cases, more and more situations. So more complex the situation, more variety the situation, the better they get at diagnosing. And I think always have a very inquisitive approach towards problems, because most of the time you're not sure of what the situation is. You're only looking at the symptoms. You have a hypothesis. So always looking for opportunities to test that hypothesis, being inquisitive, looking at the same problem from different lens can help feed into being able to diagnose the situation better. And another interesting thing is this makes the entire profession more intrinsically satisfying. One, it's a lifelong journey. You never get tired, bored, or you always are excited, you're interested, and also you can get to see the difference that it's making with the partners or with the things that you're working with. So it intrinsically very fulfilling, and it definitely helps create an impact. See the impact the function has in the organizations or in the context that you're working with.
Thank you so much, Vittal, for a very, very generous session of sharing your experiences, your learnings. And I'm sure this will help many of us pick ideas, pick cues, and really start journeys from that point on. Thank you very much for joining pretty much late in the night for this recording. Just for information of our viewers, we do all these recordings after all our office is over and office work is over, and then it's fairly silent all around.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here and look forward to more such lessons for learning and growth. Thank you so much. Really.
We definitely would love to have you probably on specific competencies in the future, Vittal. Thank you so much for the invitation also. So stay safe and stay at home, right? So that's the jingle going around these days. And on that note, we'll close this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really.